Hey everyone, and welcome to this painting tutorial. In this video I show you how to paint a portrait with watercolors and color pencils, and today's model is the beautiful Harmony Nice. As always, you can find a list of all materials that I used to create this painting down in the video description, along with links where to purchase them. For this painting I started off with filling in the background. The order doesn't really matter. Sometimes I like to start with the face instead, but oftentimes I like to change things up. So for this portrait I chose a blue and brown tone and a couple of metallic paints to fill in the space around the portrait portion. I never know how my paintings will look at the end of the painting process when I paint with watercolors, because they are random at times and do things that I just can't foresee. So I try to have no expectations at all and let myself surprise by the end result. This just makes the painting process so much easier and takes away all the stress that I often had in the past. And this way I'm just making some abstractions and adding some splashes and just loose drops of paint onto the paper in order to make an interesting and abstract backdrop. Now it's important to let everything dry before you continue with the face. If you would add the skin tone directly after you painted the background, the colors would bleed into each other and you get a complete mess. So I like to bleed in the colors of the hair, for example, with the background, but I don't like to do that with the paint within the portrait section. So here I'm waiting until everything is dry. The same with the eyes, the irises. In all areas where you don't want the colors to mix, you have to wait until they're dry. Also, now we are entering the ugly stage of the watercolor painting. With each artwork you do, there will always be some stage of the artwork where you think you completely ruined it and it looks absolutely horrendous. So with this watercolor painting, it started by looking like a complete mutant and slowly turned into something decent. The first step that I'm doing when painting the face is just filling everything in with the appropriate colors. For example, I like to add a pink tone to the cheeks. I like to fill in the eyes and the eye color, the eyebrows and the lips. And it doesn't look good because I don't really pay attention to straight lines or to any blendings. I just fill in the colors. And the reason is that I am going to add a complete layer of color pencils later on in the painting process. So I don't have to worry about the face looking like a complete mess right now. If you're just working with watercolors, you have to pay more attention to all of that though. After having filled in all the major parts of the face, I directly move on to working with color pencils. In the video description you'll find all the materials that I use for this painting, but I will just say it here for you. It is important that you use a rather matte and smooth paper if you want to work with color pencils in combination with watercolors, because the more textured your paper is, the stronger the texture of the color pencils will be visible. So I always try to work on very smooth paper. Here I'm correcting the shape of the eyes and also the evenness, because in the beginning they just were completely uneven and looked completely odd. So with the color pencils I have the best control and I can shape the irises and the eyes until they are symmetrical. Then I worked on the nose and I put a lot of attention in rendering the nostrils exactly like the reference photo. Of course, this is not really possible, but I try to mimic the shape and the angle of the nose as best as I can. Noses are super difficult to paint because we always think that they're just two nostrils and that's it. But each nose is very, very complicated and it has a lot of weird little details, especially around each nostril and the wings of the nose and the nose tip as well. And also there are little shadows around all of that. In order to get a decent looking nose, you have to add all those tiny details and also pay attention to the color values. For example, the nostrils are of course very dark. I paint them black in this portrait, but then there is a tiny little border around the blackness which is slightly lighter so that they blend into the surrounding skin tone. If I would just add two black nostrils and I have those sharp edges, this looks really horrible and absolutely not natural. So it is important to almost use a magnifying glass and look at your reference photo and check where you have to add harsh edges, smooth edges, where you can find subtle variation in midtones and dark tones to paint a good nose. noses are difficult. But don't worry, you don't have to be so meticulous with each feature of the face. I feel the nose and the eyes are most difficult, and the rest of the face you don't have to be that strict with, in my opinion at least. Then I continued filling in the larger parts of the face, which are the cheeks, the jaw, and the borders of the face. Here we also have subtle color variations, and to render them with watercolors is really difficult, and this is, in my opinion, only possible if you have the right watercolor and paper. Here, for this portrait, I deliberately choose to use rather cheap watercolors, which with I can't really layer that well. But if I wanted to paint the face only with watercolors and layer up watercolor over watercolor, I would choose a more expensive brand of watercolors and of watercolor paper, for example Schminke and Fabriano paper, because when they are sunk into the paper, they stay there. Here I'm working with the very affordable Komorebi watercolors and with a cheap kind of paper too. And whenever I want to build up layers, the underlying layers will just be reactivated and everything gets merged into each other. Why I am telling you this? Because I don't need to layer watercolor here in this portrait. I completely rely on the color pencil process. This is why I fill in the complete face with color pencils and make all those subtle variations only with the pigments of the color pencils. And you can do that with watercolors, but then again, you have to choose the right art materials, and you will probably not be able to make such perfect blendings, and you don't get as much control as you have with color pencils. But it is possible too. It is just another technique. After having added all those mid-tone variations and shades that give the face more depth, I continued with filling in the eyebrows. For the eyebrows, I used a similar technique that I just described with the nostrils. Here, the worst thing that you could do is draw a dark eyebrow on a light skin and then do nothing else. This would look absolutely unnatural. When you paint hair, imagine that each hair has a little shadow around it, and when you look at it from a distance, this shadow creates a smooth border around the area of that particular hair. So whenever I paint eyebrows or draw eyebrows, I pay attention that I make them very smooth at the edges so that they blend into the skin tone. And in order to do that with color pencils, I just work with very light pressure and light colors in the beginning, and then for the darker parts of the eyebrows, I just use more pressure and darker tones. I also add a couple of individual hair on top of the eyebrow just to give the impression that they are made of actual hair, but I would never paint every individual hair because that as well looks unnatural. When you look at a face, you really don't notice like each individual eyebrow hair. This is just not how that works. Then after having finished the eyebrows, I again continued with working on the depth of the face. It is important to always check with the reference photo. So whenever I finish one feature and I worked on the darkest tones there, sometimes I realize that the rest of the painting doesn't add up and I have to match the color value. So oftentimes the complete portrait portion is way too light. So I just add more layers of color pencils and work more on the depth until everything fits together. Then to complete the portrait portion, I worked on the lips, and here I follow the same rules that I follow for eyebrows and nostrils and probably basically everything else. The shapes of the lips are not super harsh, so I use a light gray or white pencil to draw over the complete outline of the lips in order to make a transition to the surrounding skin tone. You can do this with every dark stroke that you draw on your portrait. If you go along the edges with a lighter tone, you can smooth it out a bit. Oftentimes I use Luminance color pencils from Caran d'Ache because they are wax-based and they are relatively opaque, so you can lighten up a dark color pencil with them. With other brands of color pencils, this is often not the case, so my Luminance pencils are always saving me. After having finished the portrait portion of the face with color pencils, I continued with painting in the hair and the flower crown. Here I wanted everything to be very abstract, loose and painterly. So I indicated the hair just with a couple of brush strokes, and I only added a couple of brush strokes for the flower crown as well. Then I decided to give the painting a couple more splashes. I covered the face and mixed very diluted watercolor to add some random wild splashes all over the painting. After that I wasn't completely satisfied with it though, so I decided to get some of the fine liners that I recently received from Arteza, which come in 48 colors actually, which was perfect for the drawing, and I just experimented with redrawing some of the hair strands and the outlines of the flower blossoms. By the way, the wonderful people from Arteza sent me another discount code for you. Just use Leopoldbrückner2 at the checkout and get 10% off your whole order. I will also include the discount code in the video description for you to copy and paste. I love working rough with fine liners because on the one side I'm extremely impatient, and on the other side I really like those loose, rough, scribbling lines. So I just added some messy lines here and there. I really like those liners, by the way, and that they come in so many different colors. I should work more often with them. And this is how I painted my second portrait of Harmony Nice. Now, if you want to see the full 2 hours long real-time step-by-step painting lesson, support me on Patreon at the $5 reward tier. You get to download my initial sketch, the reference photo, the material list, and get access to over 90 free painting lessons as well. And if you want to learn more, I have lots of tutorials and real-time lessons available for you on my Patreon site, in which I teach you my technique in detail and step-by-step. In many of my videos you even get to see my mixing process in a second camera window, and you can download the reference photo too. On top of that, all videos are downloadable and you can keep them forever. For just $5 a month you get instant access to over 70 painting videos. That's pretty neat, right? And for only $10 you get access to another whole library of unrated but even longer real-time videos of all my recent artworks. If you have seen some of my works and you always wondered how I did them, then this pledge is the right one for you. Just visit my website and browse the tutorial section. There you will find a list of all lessons and real-time videos available. And for the extra portion of art, you might even fancy the art surprise tier. For only $5 more, I sent you a beautiful set of 3 unique art gifts each month. I chose the best artworks and illustrations that I created and turned them into beautiful magnets, stickers and postcards, which are not only wonderful decorations for your home, but also are rare collectibles, because once I send them out, they won't be available anywhere else and I don't reprint them. So get your art surprises package this month. So what are you waiting for? Up your painting game and join me now on patreon.com/leopoldbrückner. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next one. Bye bye!